And I think a lot of immigrant children, we do that. We like sacrifice our own emotional needs in order to maintain family harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually does us a great disservice because it doesn't shift the caregiving dynamic from parent to child. And it reverses it, and it feels like it's going from child to parent.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so bad about that for us as immigrant kids is that it trains us to not consider our own emotional needs as important or relevant or in need of like tending to. And so we often will find ourselves in romantic relationships where we are, meeting a very similar dynamic, where we are partnering ourselves with people who cannot meet our emotional needs because they can't even empathize with us in the ways that we need empathy.
Hey everyone, welcome to Season 1, Episode 7 of Migrations. Today's episode gets really deep into politics, body image, heteronormativity, and more. It was an honor speaking to Sonalee Rashatwar, who I'll introduce in just a minute. But first, I need to ask for your help. I know that so much is going on right now. The world is turned upside down, and we are just trying to navigate. So I totally understand if you're having tough times. I feel like this is a time where people on the margins need support more than ever, which is exactly why I have centered Asian voices within this podcast. Not only do I interview Asians from so many ancestries, but the art, music, and editing behind this podcast all come from Asian backgrounds. This is how serious I was about centering Asian voices, because I felt like this is critical to recentering Asian narratives. Coordinating guests, pre-interviewing them, scheduling the recording, which usually happens in my closet where I'm sitting right now, listening and re-listening to the episodes, writing scripts, and adding in audio take hours each week. So if you are able, please head over to my Patreon page at www.patreon.com/migrations to contribute whatever you can. I offer a sneak peek into episodes for as little as $5 a month, and I send you a book if you contribute $20 a month. Of course, if you want to make a one-time contribution, that's totally fine. This page is also linked in the show notes. Last but not least, if you like the show, please, pretty please rate it. This helps me a lot. And if you want, feel free to write a review. As always, thank you so much for your support. Hi, everyone. I want to welcome Sonalee Rashatwar, aka the Fat Sex Therapist on Instagram. Sonalee uses she, they pronouns. They're an award-winning clinical social worker, sex therapist, adjunct lecturer, and grassroots organizer based in Philadelphia. They're also a super fat, queer, bisexual, non-binary therapist specializing in treating sexual trauma, body image issues, racial or immigrant identity issues in South Asian family systems, while offering fat and body-positive sexual health care. Sonalee identifies as an Indian mixed caste recovering Hindu, and they've been working in the field of anti-violence for over 8 years. You can find them on Instagram at The Fat Sex Therapist and online at www.sonaleer.com. And just for reference, we're recording this episode on March 22nd. And I just wanted to clarify that, given the changing landscape in our world these days, how it's changing at any moment. So, hey, Sonalee, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Nisha, for having me. It is really a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Wonderful. So how are you doing with everything going on these days?
I have to admit, I am really anxious right now. I'm on the East Coast and I'm based in Philly, like you mentioned, and we just got the order for shelter in place starting tomorrow. And it's basically how a lot of us have been operating over the last 9 days.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just spiked my anxiety a little bit. So I'm talking to you with this even toned voice, and inside my heart is racing.
Oh, well, I'm giving you a social distancing hug.
Thank you.
I do understand Thursday night is when California got the order, basically. I don't know if it was called Safer at Home, not technically shelter in place, and I still haven't quite figured out the difference. And I agree. I mean, I felt like myself and a lot of people I know were operating that way, but there's something about that order that really spiked
Yeah.
my anxiety that night. So I probably should have just like not have worked from home on Friday, but I was just trying to go through the motions. But yeah, it could be very anxiety inducing, understanding that this needs to happen, I don't know.
Yeah. There's something about like the state telling us to do it that really freaks me out.
Yes, I think that was part
I
of it too, for sure.
Yeah. I read this post that really like freaked me out about how the state actually is like relinquishing a lot of control or actually like is putting it on our shoulders as individuals. And it was this tweet from a person named Montreal Girl
Mm-hmm.
where she basically said quarantine without testing is a project of social control that
Mm.
transfers responsibility for sickness from states to individuals.
That's really intense.
Right?
Yeah. Wow.
I'm sorry, now we're like really
Oh no, that's super intense. Like I'm trying to like peel back the layers of that because
Yeah.
it's like the state's telling us to do things for our public health, which I do think that it is their responsibility to have like for there to be some sort of like voice for certain areas, right?
Sure,
Um,
guidelines, sure.
yeah, definitely, yeah. But at the same time, who is responsible for our health? Why
Mhm,
like
mhm.
shouldn't they also be responsible to a degree for that? But it's hard when so many things are privatized and there's so much bureaucracy.
Yeah, when healthcare is for profit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's what
Mhm,
I think is the most disturbing thing about all of this is that one reason we're trying to flatten the curve is to truly not overwhelm the healthcare system because besides this crisis, people are still sick. Things still happen to
mhm,
people that have nothing to do with COVID-19.
mhm,
Yet there isn't a fast turnaround. The testing seems like such a mess that we can't just get
mhm.
testing where other countries are somehow able to mobilize. It's very confusing too, and I think there's a lot of inner workings that the everyday public just doesn't know, including myself. Like,
Mm.
how can we just get this to work? You know what I mean?
It's a scary time.
That is a scary time. So I'm going to actually transition to a question that has nothing to do with this and might bring a little levity. And I wanted to talk to you about melons because we had a brief conversation on Instagram about melons. And I'm just going to ask you, even though I know this answer, about whether you prefer cantaloupe or honeydew melons.
This is so great, thank you. This question is so much better. Why did we start talking about the apocalypse?
I know. Maybe I should have started this way. My bad.
I am a diehard cantaloupe fan, and believe it or not, I have a cantaloupe sitting right on my kitchen table as we speak.
Oh my God, that is so amazing. That just warms my heart to know that, at least you got cantaloupes at the market, you know?
I did my grocery shopping yesterday. Me and my girlfriend, we were at the grocery store, and I feel like I went grocery shopping for a month. So I brought home tons of things. And one of the apocalypse fruits that I wanted was a cantaloupe. So let the record show I love cantaloupe so much.
Oh
I
my
would like it
God.
to be one of my last fruits.
I know it is one of my favorite fruits too. Like I remember growing up and my parents always like cut fruit with dinner. It was always something that I really, really enjoyed just because I love fruit so much. And we would always
Yeah.
have cantaloupe and I liked it so much, but I always felt growing up in various places in this country, it was always honeydew that people liked more. And I never understood it. It just felt so mediocre to me. I'm just like, this is
I
not as
love
sweet and
now
juicy as cantaloupe.
I love both of them, I must say. But it was the same in my family too. They seem to like honeydew more than cantaloupe, but we would never have one without the other, which is also very strange. So to
Oh,
me, they feel like a
interesting.
couplet. Yeah, I feel like it's peanut
Oh.
butter and jelly, it's honeydew and cantaloupe.
That's really interesting. Well,
Isn't
I
that
guess,
funny?
yeah, it is interesting. So, whenever I would go to places, I usually feel like I do see both on a fruit tray. I notice that people take the honeydew more. And that's always, I think, what has
Interesting.
internally hurt me a little bit because I'm like, I
Wow.
mean, I'm glad
Wow.
more cantaloupe for me. But at the same time, I'm like, how can y'all
True.
not like cantaloupe? Like, it's sweeter, it's so much more rich. But, that's just me. but
It
and you.
looks
So
visually engaging. It has a color.
yes,
I'm into it. I'm very into it.
same.
Cantaloupe identity politics.
Yes, I think this should be examined a little more. Someone needs to write some type of dissertation about this.
This should be the title of this episode.
You know what? All right. I'm doing it. That's fine with me. I mean, nothing wrong with melons as a topic.
No, nope.
Yeah, I just realized that it is like kind of like a coral deep peach is one of my favorite colors. So maybe that's part of it too.
It's got to
Mm,
be.
yeah. I think it's also probably a fruit that lasts a while, right? Like,
Yeah, it does. You can cut it up until it's like molding on the outside,
yeah,
and you can
yeah.
still
And
get a pretty delicious fruit in the middle.
yes, definitely.
Yep.
Even if it's a little like too ripe, like the
Yep.
slight fermentation is quite enjoyable.
Oh, I totally agree. That's an unpopular opinion, but I totally agree.
Yeah, yeah. We're gonna make some cantaloupe wine.
I would drink that. No joke.
Yeah, same. So whenever I come to Philly, we will cheers to some cantaloupe wine. How about that?
You know what? I'll get it started.
Awesome. Yeah,
By the time quarantine's over, it'll be ready.
yes, that's true. That's true. It probably will be. Oh, good. I'm glad we could, joke about that. So
Oh, God. Yeah.
after our scintillating melon chat, I asked Sonalee about their background as a social worker, sex therapist, and organizer.
So I am born and raised Jersey girl. And I say girl with that emphasis because I'm non-binary. And so as a non-binary person, I'm not necessarily a woman necessarily, but I do still like calling myself a girl. So I'm ride or die for the East Coast. I'm from the area. I've always been from here. My family lives in Jersey. I live in Philadelphia. It's a short drive away.
Mhm.
And my journey to social work was completely accidental. I was not one of those people who knew at age 10 that they wanted to be a sex therapist. I was always a very sexual person. And a lot of the slut shaming that I experienced in my family would, set me apart and really signaled me as some kind of layman's sexpert within like my siblings and cousins and friends.
Mm.
But my transition to social work started in my mid 20s when a friend of mine was going to the grad school that we both went to just outside Philadelphia. And she told me a little bit about social work and that social work is basically anything. You could do anything in the whole world with a master's in social work degree, which really feels exciting to me because I feel like I need to have my hands in like 10 different pots at the same time. And I need to have like, 3 different side hustles and projects going. I'm a Gemini like that. I don't know if it's a
Nice.
Gemini thing. Maybe it's a Capricorn thing. Who cares?
Yeah, who
Anyway.
cares? It works.
Anyway, it's me. And my friend basically told me that it was a way to be like a professional activist and not in the gross, like snowflake, anti-liberal way,
Hmm.
but in the sense that you could make a career infusing your work with your politics and you could not have to live a life where they become segmented and dichotomized where you can only like live your politics in the evening. And I really liked the sound of that. And I was already someone who was interested in exploring my own sexual orientation. I had fallen in love with a woman in my early 20s for the first time and had really lived in this like sad swamp of like internalized biphobia,
Hmm.
really like neglecting myself the opportunity to love someone of a similar gender. And there was something really interesting about the program that I thought, I would meet other people who were also talking about taboo subjects and not afraid to go there and not afraid to talk about the intersections of gender and class and race and colonialism.
Hmm.
And what was really depressing about grad school is that I get there hoping that I'll be surrounded by other leftists and radicals like me. And to be honest, I was like maybe a baby leftist back then. Like I was still kind of a liberal in a lot of really big ways.
Hmm.
But grad school really radicalized me and forced me to be disillusioned by the understanding that like liberals don't actually have our best interests in mind either, just like conservatives, because grad school was a traumatizing time of learning about really what mainstream social work is and how it operates, which is like to uphold the status quo and to kind of operate within the nonprofit industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, I had like a couple of rabble rouser classmates who were like-minded and political, and we bucked a lot of the systems in grad school, and it was fantastic. And it was also extremely white. And what grad school did for me was push me to find politicized South Asians where I was living,
Mm-hmm.
because those are communities that I've always felt safe in. You know, safety to some degree, because I've still always was a kid who would talk about the sex that I was having with my Indian friends and not always get good reactions, or talk about the drugs and that I wanted to be doing and not having good reactions, or
Yeah,
talk
right.
about rules I was breaking and speeding and didn't have good reactions. So safety to some extent. And finding that community really helped in grad school. I think it pushed me to really deepen my politics and idea of being an other, when actually there are actually so many fucking rad leftist South Asian organizers doing super important work in the world. And I feel grateful to have found them.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting how you talked about social work being something that you initially, your friend told you you could basically do whatever you want. And I never even thought about it that way. And while you found this very kind of liberal whiteness, while you were in grad school, thankfully you were still able to find a sense of community in others. So in a way, you still have been able to shape what you do around this idea of social work and sex therapy and whatnot, it seems.
Absolutely, yes. When I was being radicalized by not seeing myself reflected in the curriculum, by seeing, Easternness and otherness, pathologized in my curriculum, having us being seen as backwards or savages, it really pushed me to find people who look like me and think like me so that I didn't feel fucking othered. Yeah, the people I found were through Facebook groups, and my best friend to this day, his name is Tarek. He and we met maybe like 7 years ago through a Facebook group called Desi Punks,
Hmm.
and it is a group that doesn't exist anymore, at least in the form that it did then. And it was basically like a Facebook group for like South Asian outcasts. And I read so much about what living on the margins of South Asian identity looks like. It looks like, having families that struggle with like divorce or addiction or incarceration or deportation, or just so many additional experiences that felt like mine and then didn't feel like mine, and really deepened my understanding